So while we got the car up and while we're kind of managing under the hood here, I thought it might be a good opportunity to swap the battery. So this is the old Porsche original battery. It was doing okay, but it was starting to have a little bit of start problems. Like, again, nothing really terrible, but after sitting for a little while, it didn't really want to turn over. And so I have a new lighter weight, let's say, Odyssey battery and a Rennline battery sort of hold down with a battery cutoff switch provision as a part of it. And basically, as I track my cars, safety is a top priority. And while this does make it a little inconvenient on the Porsche, and we'll get to that later, it's better safe than sorry to have a battery quick disconnect despite its inconveniences. And like I said, I'll mention those later. I've already done a little bit of pre-work like any other cooking show would do. There's enough videos on the internet about how to remove battery on a Porsche. I really didn't think that I would need to add my own. So basically, first steps first is you pull out your air pump or tire inflator holder, which is usually sits right here. That's this guy. Then remove the ground from the battery, remove the battery hold down strap, and then finally remove the battery. Quick and dirty, there's plenty of videos. Next step is, while we have this open, I'm going to take the chance to vacuum out any debris that I see. I've already seen evidence of rodents up in here, probably not from my ownership, but previous ownership, and I've cleared some of that out already, so I'm going to just take a quick chance and vacuum out the rest of this area underneath and around the battery tray. All right, next step. So we have our battery hold down tray. And on the tray itself, now, again, I've done a little bit of pre-work. I have our battery kind of isolation pads in here that'll help, and I've kind of pre-attached these side clamps to the base plate, but they're nice and loose because we'll need to adjust these for the battery once we get the battery in. On the plate itself, one side has kind of a lifted edge, and down in the battery tray, you'll see that down here there's a kind of a lifted indentation spot, and that's where the lifted edge of the plate will go. So we're just going to slip this guy in here so it's nice and snug and it fits. It locates in the back and it locates on the left side. And then we will take our bolt that would normally hold down our Porsche clamp, which is this guy here, and we're going to use it to cinch down our plate instead. And this is just a 13mm bolt. We can use one hand to hold the plate in place and the other to cinch it down. We don't want to cinch it down too tight just yet, though, because we still need to be able to move our actual battery clamps. So we'll back that off maybe a little bit more. So at first you just want to get the bolt in so it's a little loosey-goosey like everything else, and that ensures that you can slide your brackets back and forth as need be, and make sure you have all the room you need. And you'll start with them really wide, and then once we get the battery in, we'll get everything in play. Actually, you know what? We'll put it in the most right receptacle for the bolt, so we can slide our battery over to make room for our cutoff switch provisions. So let's get the battery and we'll toss it in. Now on our cables, our negative side is on the driver's side if you're in the US. So we want to make sure that we line up the negative side of our battery on the driver's side. We're going to push our plate all the way over. And this is kind of where you're going to do some finagling to get everything lined up as best you can. So you want our two side brackets here nice and snug against the battery, and then you want your base plate nice and snug in the battery tray. And before we tighten anything, let's get the top cover. Okay, with our top cover, we're going to loosely put this into place with our M6 bolts, and then each of these will get a nylon washer. And then on our passenger side, there is a special bracket here, and this is for our remote disconnect. So you want your bracket with a nylon washer, and then our bolt, our M6 button head. And I know it kind of blocks the camera, but that's the way it goes sometimes. And again, we're just going to finger tighten these, and we're just going to use a 4mm bit. We're going to get everything nice and snug around the battery, and we're just going to start snugging these up a little bit by hand, little by little. And then once we're happy with the placement of those brackets and they're nice and tight on the battery, we can shove our battery tray over and hold it while we tighten the aluminum tray into the Porsche battery tray. And then once that is in, we can start tightening up the bolts on the bottom and then work our way up. Though I may need to go and get a smaller ratchet. All right, now that we got those cinched in, give the battery a good wiggle, make sure it's nice and tight. Again, we're not hooking up our battery cables just yet. Now that the bottom is done, we'll cinch up the top. Now, normally at this point, what we would do is we would cut our positive plug here off. We would keep our tab, and then we would put a ring terminal on for our quick disconnect switch. However, I'm not ready to do that, and we'll cover why in a moment. So next up, we'll start attaching our battery terminals. Everything's cinched down. It's nice and tight. It's not moving anywhere. So we'll go ahead and connect up our terminals now. We'll do the positive first, and the battery terminals just take a 10 mil. It's nice and snug. And then when we hook up the negative terminal, you might see a little bit of sparking, but don't be alarmed. And again, we'll cinch this one up. Just be careful to not touch the positive battery terminal. And there we go. Everything's nice and tight. Next, we're going to add our pull cable. So the way this works is on one end of the cable, you have a red loop that you pull, and when you do so, on the other end, this will be connected to our switch. You pull one end, it pulls on the other, and the way this will work is we'll attach this to the switch so that when we pull this emergency loop, it activates the battery cutoff and then kills power to the car. First steps first is we need to remove our little stop there. We're going to feed the cable through the bracket, and we're going to remember to remove our nuts and our stop nut. These are just 10mm nuts, so just throw a wrench on either side, again being careful of the positive battery terminal. Cinch it up, nice and easy there. And then lastly, we're going to slide our little barrel crimp over the end, make sure that we've pulled our cable tight, and we're going to tighten this against our cutoff switch. Now we don't have to worry about the excess. When Rennline supplies this cable, they are nice enough to actually weld the end so it won't fray, which is actually a really nice little feature. And then next, we're just going to do a test. Right now it won't cut off the power because we don't have our positive battery cable going through this switch, but we will test and make sure that the install of the cable, the switch, and the barrel are tight enough that they do work properly. Takes a little bit of force, but once you yank on it, it does pull the power successfully. To answer the questions from earlier and the things I've hinted at, why not connect all this up and make it work right now? We're kind of at a catch-22 at the moment. Whereas if I pull this emergency disconnect, that cuts power to the car, which is good, that's what we want. However, this only works in one direction. So if I pull it, I can't push it back to flip the switch. I need to get into the frunk in order to reset this power switch. But how do you do that when the frunk is electrical? The trunk release for the 911s is electric. And yes, I know that there's a jump point under the dash, but it requires a set of jumper cables, and it's not just a quick and easy thing. It is a little bit of a hassle. So before I hook this up and make it permanent, what I'm looking for is a better way to enable either powered release of the hood or to install a cable much like this one with a manual pull for the hood. That way I can get under it and reset it. Now for installing a manual pull like this, of course, when you're out on the street, it's a security thing. Like if you lock something in the trunk, anyone can just get into it. So I really don't want to do it that way if I can avoid it. So I'm trying to find a good way to have an electrical circuit run that I could pop the hood electrically, just to make it a little bit easier or a little bit cleaner. So for now, we'll just leave it like this, but we'll still go through and mount this cable where it's supposed to go. But for the moment, let's go ahead and put everything back where it's supposed to be here under the hood. So again, this is our compressor storage box. It just pops into place like so. It's held in with some clips here on the edge, and then it's just got a couple T20 screws on one end here that locates our external speaker. This is what you hear when you set the alarm, etc. There's one screw inside, and this co-locates a bracket for our wheel nut tool. And then finally, the last one is out here on the corner, which is externally accessible, or you can do it with the hood, the top up. And then again, our compressor just sits in here nice. And we've got our top back on. And I had pulled out my internal filter. Just gonna pop that back in. That's due for replacement. Just pop the cover back down, nice and easy. And as you see, we have a couple of bolts left over, plus our battery hold down clamp, and these we won't use, but we'll put them together with the rest of the battery hold down clamp, and we'll hold on to them for now. All right, I'm not sure when the camera cut off, but I've got our cable fully installed now. So here's our cutoff switch, and I've run the cable over and across underneath our wiper assembly over to the corner here, where it comes up underneath next to our hood hinge, wraps around, and then is accessible with the hood closed. So if I close this now, you'll be able to see the red loop sticking out of the hood. And normally, in the case of emergency, in most motorsports, you want to have everything close to the driver or driver's side so that first responders can pull power with a nice good yank. If there was a fire extinguisher button, they would also be around this area, and they would hit that, and it would set off a fire extinguisher, and then you would pull the driver out of the car. But in this instance, I still need to figure out how I want to connect power up to that switch and make it look nice. And then I also want to have something that's externally accessible. Now, I know there's a lot of smart cookies out there, and they're going to tell me that there is a manual pull up in the front wheel well. I know that. And there is an accessible location in the fuse box where you can add 12-volt power and pop the hood manually. But I want something a little more accessible than that, something easier to reach, because inevitably, as has been happening a lot at car shows, Cars and Coffee, etc., troublemakers will come by and pull emergency cables or set off fire extinguishers. So I just want to have as much reduced hassle as possible, and that's kind of my train of thought. So for now, it's not connected, but it is in place, and I won't put the stickers or labels on until it's actually functional and working. So a couple quick little projects today. Wanted to knock those out on the Porsche. It's been on the list for a while. In fact, I've got a laundry list of parts to go on the car before Rennsport, which is literally right around the corner as I film this. I think it's less than 2 weeks away now. I want to try and get a livery on the car. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. Honestly, just getting the wheels and tires and this battery disconnect and these aero bits on the car was farther than I was expecting to get with all the delays. So right now, as the car sits, I'm pretty happy. So next up, I do want to get a track day in the Porsche. I do want to get some interior bits done. In fact, those are in the works now. I could share one thing that I've purchased recently that is basically worth its weight in gold. So if you've driven a Porsche with the carbon bucket seats for any length of time, usually you'll have a sore back after a while. And I found that this is a Tempur-Pedic car pillow. It's a lumbar support, and this thing is amazing. I don't usually hawk other products, but when that literally saves your back for a long drive, I think that is worth giving my 2 cents on. So if you have one of these cars or have those seats in your car, or if you're just running around with fixed back buckets, I highly recommend getting one of those Tempur-Pedic pillows. Well, I think that's going to do it for today. Got a couple projects knocked out on the GT3. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.